Awesome. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
awesome. You'll never
if
move
that's
back
the case.
Yeah. Did you hit a deer? Did you hit a deer?
Went down to Missouri to play.
Did you hit a deer?
baseball one time, and I said, I'll never go down there.
Really?
104 degrees in the shade. You know?
Where?
Kansas
My
City can
driveway.
be humid, man. It can be.
Yeah, the tree in the driveway.
It was
That one that's right in the middle? The whole thing fell over?
just a big pile of
A branch fell
to
off?
the car, which is no farther from there.
So is that Ottawa?
Yeah, no,
I was
it's.
parked on,
We were doing some
normally I park on the right side of the driveway.
Yeah.
I was actually parked on the left side.
So it fell across, didn't do anything on your right side of your car though, it's just on the left side. That sucks. When did that happen?
Wow.
I just never noticed. I was parked on the other side
I
yesterday.
haven't been fixed.
That's,
Other than that, I
that,
heard it in the house.
oh really?
I was like, that didn't sound too good outside. Because I thought, because I have a camper on the other side.
Mr. Shields, how you doing, buddy?
Tim, how you doing, sir? Good to see you, man. Easy on the mister. Yes, sir. Ryan, how about yourself? What do you?
So I work at UND.
Of mine from UND, and we. So, yeah, Jim's a good old boy.
For sure, he's been paying there for a long time.
Well, yeah.
wear a necktie in the clinic because Harlan Dyrud passed away. Nice old fella. He was a magistrate over in Grand Forks, a judge. Been around a while. Nice guy.
Call to order the City Council work session for City of East Grand Forks for Tuesday, March 9th, 2021. It is now 5 o'clock with City Administrator. Please call the roll.
Mayor Steve Gander.
Here.
Council President
Mark Galstad.
Here.
Council Vice President Tim Riefelt.
Here.
Council Members Clarence Vedder.
Here.
Dale Helms.
Here.
Tim Johnson.
Here.
Mark Demers.
Present.
Brian Larson.
Here.
Does term quorum. Number 1, positive ways to rebuild the community. We have Mr. Gary Shields with us. If you want to come up to the microphone there.
Thank you. I think Megan said you would just turn that microphone there. Or?
Sure.
I don't know if they'll be able to hear
Okay,
you.
that's just what she was, but.
You want to maybe, you can sit here and talk if you want
Okay,
too.
I'll do that. Can I drop this down?
Yes.
Well, thank you very much, East Grand Forks City Council. I promise to be brief. I've watched these meetings, and I know you get through these fairly efficient. So I'm here today on a positive level. First and foremost, I'm not sure if Mr. Gordy's on the line, but I've talked to a lot of people in East Grand Forks. Not that I'm an ambassador, but I've talked to a lot of people. And we are so blessed to have the hard work that the council and the EDA has done to help us with our loans and our grant money. Thank you to every and each and one of you. Mr. Gordy, thank you. It's challenging times out there, and speaking with businesses in the community, business owners, right up until today, what we're trying to do is we're trying to recognize that the Chamber of Commerce does a great job for our community. We're a little smaller than Grand Forks. When you go through the Chamber booklet, you'll see there's approximately 1,100 members. East Grand Forks, I counted them out today, comprises of 85 of those businesses, so we're about 8.5%, 9% of their membership. But, you know, we're proportional to the city. Unique situations call for unique times. It's hard for the Chamber to, after being closed for 7 weeks as businesses, to put a sign up in Grand Forks and say, hey, okay, for the next 7 weeks, let's go support our team over there. They can't do it, they shouldn't do it. And I wanted, for the record this evening, to first of all recognize the EDA and the council for their hard work. That everybody I've talked to has said, please share that message, so I'm sharing that this evening. People don't tend to come in, I know, I've been told that, but it's important to come in and let you know in person, because it means a lot, it's not just words. So what we're proposing, and I say we, it's a grassroots effort, is let's take a look at maybe, and I'm not suggesting make a motion this evening or maybe next meeting, but let's take a look at maybe finding some funding for maybe a small office, maybe a person. Certainly not myself, I'm full-time employed. But these are unique times, and speaking to folks on the 220 corridor, speaking to folks all over the town, they just feel that we need to get back to doing a little bit of promotions ourselves, because again, this is a unique situation. Who would have guessed when the chambers were merged that a pandemic would hit? If we had a separate chamber today in East Grand Forks, and what would the expectations be? We'd probably have banners slid on those wires out there facing East Grand Forks that we invested lots of money in, that would be saying, Grand Forks wants you back. Drive to East Grand Forks. Some type of a campaign promotion. Now, when I say 2 years, that's a consensus of speaking to the folks in the community that feel it's going to probably take that long for us to try to get back to what we've lost. I spoke to a young lady today that's working for a restaurant that had to close her business down in East Grand Forks due to COVID. Now she's working over at a restaurant. We've seen other businesses close. This is no fault of East Grand Forks. This is simply the fact that we're in a border town where we have a government, and this is not politics. This is just simply a fact that it's a unique situation. And we have to make lemonade out of lemons. I have talked to other folks that are better promoters than I. I've spoke to Justin over at the Spud Jr. I won't talk about what we talked about, but he's one of your biggest promoters in the community and has done a great job trying to bring attention to the community. So as the old guy, I'm sitting here today saying, let's be positive and let's consider having someone or some type of structure where we can really have a focus, where we do a collaboration. And it could be anything. It could be finding money through the EDA or somehow through the city where, again, not to pick on any, but we're buying movie tickets, we're distributing them throughout restaurants, and we're creating dinner and a movie no matter what restaurant you go to. I won't get into any more details because you don't need to hear promotion ideas, but that's the type of thing that I think East Grand Forks can do, because when you go on various sites, and again, I'm not picking on the chamber, but if we were to, their video has about a 3-second shot of the front of the boardwalk. Again, we're smaller, but we need each other. You hear conversations that East Grand Forks needs Grand Forks, but Grand Forks doesn't need East Grand Forks. I say we need each other. We have synergies through our infrastructure in the community, and we have synergies through our chamber, and we have other methods. One small thing to that, the Knight Foundation through the Grand Forks Community Foundation has created a campaign. If you go on Evolve, you'll see that campaign. I spoke to the folks at the foundation, and from what I understand, that money has to stay in Grand Forks. So when the community sees these programs and they see Grand Forks, East Grand Forks, there's assumptions. And that's not there. My first job in East Grand Forks was Cooper and Boxcars for Dwayne Erickson, across the street from the Red River Potato Growers Association, where I worked for over a decade promoting potatoes for North Dakota, Minnesota. I love East Grand Forks. And I know you folks do too, because that's why you're here. What I'm saying is, unique situations call for unique times. And if we could figure out a way to try to maybe create a temporary position, not a big fancy high paying, but some mechanism. I'm trying to plant a seed this evening to say, we love what the chamber does. They do a great job. I know you've been in conversations with Mr. Whitford on their chamber. You meet 4 times a year officially. So I wanted to clear the air that the chamber's there to do a great job for us. But we need to help ourselves a little bit, and I think that we should help ourselves a little bit. I would entertain any questions to end so you can continue your meeting. But this is all positive, and it's a way to try to get a movement going to say, let's do this. Let's fly the banners. Let's get it going. Let's do promotions, and let's see what happens. There's no risk, all gain, and thank you for that.
Anybody have any questions? Mr. Shields? Mr. Elms?
I think what Mr. Shields is trying to get across is kind of like, and he didn't mention it, but I will. And I just talked to one today. 220 North Merchants used to have a program up there years ago where they'd all get together and throw in money and promote 220 North. And I think that's kind of along that same line. What he's looking at is to try and get some together, put some together and promote East Grand Forks, and East Grand Forks businesses is what we're really looking at. Shop East Grand Forks, because we do have something to offer here. So I think that's where he's coming from, is that he just wants to, like he said, he's just putting a seed out there, and hopefully we can bite on it and try to get something set up and do something with it. So
Maury Finney was a promoter.
Yeah.
Everybody that remembers Maury, that was Maury, that was Dave from Leisureland, that
Yeah.
was that group of folks over there.
Yeah.
We have the corridor in conclusion, we have 220 North coming in, we have Highway 2 coming in. This is a great community, and why I'm here for you folks is you're so busy trying to run the city that we feel that maybe we can help you. It's just a call to action to say, let us help. You're doing a great job. There's no expectations beyond what you're doing. It's let us be a part of this team from a promotional standpoint. Let's not pick on the chamber. They'll continue to do a great job for the community, but we need a standalone program. And I think everybody would agree if we had a chance to sit and visit more on that. I'll end on that, and God bless you, and thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate you coming, Gary. Thanks for all you do. I know
Thank
you're
you very much.
very dedicated. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, sir.
Need to answer it for you.
Okay, we'll move on to number 2, review of 2022 federal project. Mr. Emery.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, Council. So I guess as we're all aware, because we have had some discussions previously, but again in 2022, the city is scheduled to receive your federal sub-target dollars. Again, you receive about $860,000 in federal monies. That is 80% federal, 20% local. So, we do need to have about a $1.1 million project to, receive the full federal allocation. So with that, Jason and I have kind of reviewed project options that we've kind of brought forward again. With some new council members and such, it's good to kind of review everything again. So the 3 projects that we're, kind of looking at for potential projects for 2022 are the Biglin Road, Reinhardt Drive Roundabout, 10th Street Northeast reconstruction extension project out in the industrial park, and or the Biglin Road 13th Street Southeast Roundabout. So the first one, the Biglin Road Reinhardt Drive Roundabout, again, this was identified, during the Biglin Road study, was recommended for an improvement at that intersection for improved access, especially people trying to make that left turn onto Biglin in the morning. We do have just kind of a couple different options that were included in your packet that I'm sure you've looked at. But option number 1, that option would require some property acquisition, probably on the east side of Biglin. I think that option could be shifted enough that we would probably be dealing with just one property there, and then would also maybe require some property acquisition kind of in that southwest corner of there, I would call it. The second option kind of shifted the roundabout kind of to the northwest, I would call it. By doing that, I think with the initial construction, we may not have to purchase any property there. if there was ever the need for a second northbound lane, then it probably would require some property acquisition. Also with that layout, and I've worked with Alliant Engineering, who did the Biglin Road study, just to kind of lay out these two options. And they did mention that second option may require a design speed entry exception. Just with the angle, as you kind of, if you're coming from Biglin, turning on to Reinhardt there, kind of that angle and everything would lend itself to probably, not having to slow down as much as you should. So just again, may require some exception type criteria that we'd have to look at on that one. So right now, that project itself, we're looking at about $1.6 million. And that is based on about 110-foot diameter single lane roundabout at this time. The second project, I guess, for your consideration is 10th Street Northeast in the industrial park. That project would consist of kind of the following major items of construction. We'd be looking at reconstructing the existing concrete pavement section between 11th and 15th Avenue Northeast. We'd core out the road, put in drain tile, geogrid fabric, and basically a new aggregate base section. We also looked at, just kind of as a cost saving measure, that existing street out there right now is about 45 feet wide roughly. We would actually look at narrowing that up to about 34 feet wide. And kind of what we looked at there is on the south side of 10th Street right now, it's kind of set up for parking there. It doesn't seem like we really get too much parking on 10th Street, especially on the south side there. So, by eliminating that parking lane, kind of allows us to narrow up that street width and, kind of reduce some costs there too. So, second thing we looked at there as part of that project would be an extension of the concrete street on 10th Street Northeast there, from 15th Avenue going east about 1,100 feet. That stretch right now is very tough shape. This time of year especially, or during wet periods, you can't even, actually larger trucks and such can't even drive down the main road corridor to go straight east there. They actually have to drive up around onto private property just to get through there. So, and then as an alternate option, one thing we just kind of going to throw out there is, we could also look at that stretch of roadway, just look at potentially coring it out, putting in geogrid fabric, good aggregate base, so at least you could provide year-round all-weather access to the businesses along there. Other thing we would look at doing is replacing catch basins and the catch basin leads. Currently, they're probably about 37 years old. Again, like we talked, Jason did have the mainline storm sewer out there cleaned and televised last fall. And the mainline sewer itself looks good, so I think we could basically leave that in place and just, again, replace catch basins and the storm sewer leads. And then also with that project, the sanitary sewer system is clay, about 45, 46 years old, so we would actually look at replacing that clay tile sewer with the project. Right now I gave you kind of a itemized breakdown there. So right now we're looking at a total project cost of about $2.3 million roughly. If we were to eliminate the concrete paving, curb and gutter going east of 15th there, I estimate we could save probably about $500,000 by doing that. So we'd be looking at probably about a $1.8 million project. And then the last project, I guess, kind of for your consideration too, is Biglin Road and 13th Street Southeast Roundabout. Again, this is something that was identified in the Biglin Road study. It was kind of identified as a long-term improvement, not necessarily in the near term, but I guess as we all know too, we've had a lot of concerns from residents and such out in that area just with pedestrian safety, kids crossing that street. So again, kind of wanted to throw that one out there as an option for you guys to consider. That project right now, and again, I haven't done an itemized breakdown like I did on the Biglin Reinhardt Drive roundabout, but that roundabout was estimated at about $2.4 million. That was figured at about 136-foot diameter roundabout, as opposed to Biglin and Reinhardt, which again was 110 foot. So again, a little bit larger diameter roundabout. Also, basically you have 4 legs coming into that roundabout, kind of increasing the overall project cost for that too. So, but I do think, what was shown in the Biglin Road study, they show, that you may require property acquisition there. I think, if we needed to, I think we could install or get that thing installed within the right of way. So I don't think there would be any property acquisition necessarily that would be required with that. So project funding, I probably won't go through all of it, but again, project funding, for basically the 2 roundabouts, we'd have our federal sub-target dollars. We do have state aid allocation, potential maintenance funds that we could use. And one thing I should point out on the Biglin Reinhardt Drive roundabout, there's a good chance that there is some major electrical equipment there that may have to be relocated that would be a water and light cost. Probably a little bit on the high end, but they're estimating, depending on how far they'd have to move it, they're estimating that could cost up to about $130,000 there just to relocate that electrical equipment. So, and then with the 10th Street Northeast reconstruction extension project, again, we'd have federal sub-target dollars. I think the thought was we'd use sanitary sewer enterprise funds to pay for the sanitary sewer replacement. And then, we would have assessments that we would look at. According to the city's assessment policy right now on state aid streets for reconstruction, the property owner will pay about 30% of the assessments for fronts and ends there. So, and then as we discussed, currently on the STIP is the Bigland Reinhardt Drive roundabout. So if we would choose, any of these other projects, we would have to do a TIP amendment and then also an amendment to the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. I did have some email correspondence with Earl Hogan. He mentioned, just to kind of go through that whole process could take roughly 4 to 5 months. So it's something that is achievable with where we're at, today. So, so I guess with that, I think all 3 projects are good projects. I guess with that, I'll just kind of open it up for any discussion, questions you guys might want to have, but really what I'm looking for from the council is just to, decide what project do we want to do with our 2022 funding that we're going to be receiving. So,
if I may, can I just interject here for one thing? I know Public Works Superintendent Stordahl is trying to connect. He's out at the township, because today is Township Day, so he had some duties there, but he's trying to connect, I believe, for any questions, and I believe he might have an opinion to put forward on this. So if he gets through, I will patch him through.
Yep. Thank you, David.
I think one of the questions that keeps coming up in my mind as we talk about the assessments, I know that prior conversations, I guess, I think it was maybe last time we talked, that we have not talked to all the business owners out there and or the railroad. So at that time, I guess my question is, if we go back to the assessment policy, and I guess in how we do it, and we talk about the benefits test, I mean, what could we be looking at additionally for the city as a cost for the 10th Street and the extension of the 15th there? I guess that's kind of on my mind a lot of how that's going to affect us. And I guess, I don't know if you have those numbers at all, or maybe. I don't mean to put you on the spot, Steve. I didn't mean.
Yeah, no. So yeah, I guess, David tried numerous times, I know, to reach out to the railroad. They never did get back to him. So I think the assumption was, and I hate to speak for David, but that, we're probably not going to be able to assess the railroad there. So I think there is going to be some cost that's going to be probably borne by the city there.
I guess if I may interject, because it looks like on the south side of that street is the railroad and the wastewater ponds for American Crystal. It does not appear that either one of those would be accessible. So I guess what I was telling Steve is that I believe we should move forward with at least at this point, with the assumption that only the north side would be accessible, at least that we would be able to maintain. And I do believe that Public Works Superintendent Stordahl has made contact. So,
With that said, to Mr. Murphy and Mr. Emery, and then we'll let Mr. Stordahl speak. But so with that said, if we move everything assessment to the south side of it, the north side, do we run into the benefits test, and if we don't have the discussions with those people and they sign off that they're not going to, bring that up, what dollar amount does the city bear on that? And I guess we need to know that. Is my question.
Mm-hmm.
well, I guess I could answer that at this point, since it would be, typically it would be half and half. I would operate under the understanding that the city would end up needing to pick up the south side, at least the way it looks at this point, unless we could get some funding from somewhere else or what. But
basically, are you saying about $400,000?
Yeah, I don't have that number right in front of me. Whatever half that cost would be, yes.
If you take the two assessments.
For the street extension, 50% of the assessments would be, about roughly 400,000. And again, depending on, what direction you would want to go there, like I'd mentioned too, is, we could potentially, in lieu of paving, putting a curb and gutter for that stretch right now, we could look at just coring it out and getting a good gravel base in there, so at least they had a road that they could drive on year round. And again, that would, just on that street extension, a portion would save roughly $500,000.
Okay, let's say we didn't do that. Let's say we did the project. So where would that $400,000, where would that have to be, where would that come from then?
That would probably have to come out of our state aid allocation, and or we do have the federal sub-target dollars too that are going to help pay for that project. And right now, and granted, we got some of these monies dedicated for other projects too, but currently right now our state aid allocation balance is at about $925,000. And our state aid maintenance balance is probably about $790,000. So we do have some funds there too that we would be able to utilize.
Mayor?
Steve, my question was for you, and that is, do your numbers here reflect what we already know, and that is that the south side of this won't be picking up much of the cost? Did you build some of that knowledge into your analysis here?
Yeah, right now on the street extension, you know, I've figured that probably about 50% of that cost could be assessed, because again, that entire south side, you know, would not be able to be assessed.
Yep.
And then on the street reconstruction between 11th and 15th, I figured that about just 30% of that total project cost would be assessed, with, you know, again, the remaining balance and kind of again being picked up using our federal sub-target dollars or state aid allocation dollars.
Okay, thank you. I drove that street here a week or so ago just to make sure I had my head screwed on of how it all laid out in there. And as I was driving it and considering, you know, what if I owned that little strip to the south and had no intent of ever developing it because it couldn't be developed. Let's say it's just too narrow of a strip. I would never need access off that road to my strip. It would trouble me a great deal if someone tried to assess me for that street, because it really is to benefit the whole other side. And so I guess as I looked at it, it didn't feel so much like, you know, maybe the railroad playing hardball with us and not being willing to pay. It really isn't a value to them. We really are doing this for the people to the north. And so to carry the cost, it passed my smell test of fairness to what we're proposing here. If we choose to do this one, there's really no reason that they would benefit from having that road adjacent to their little railroad bed. So I do think it's good. Whatever we have, if we choose to do this one, we'll have some federal dollars, we'll have the state aid maintenance, and then the assessment that'll go to the other side. That does seem fair to me, again, if this is the one we choose. Thanks.
Mr. Galstad.
I just want to make a comment, not to disagree with the mayor. Not disagree with the mayor, but legally speaking, I believe we can, in fact, assess the south side of that road. It would be no different than us sending out notices to anybody else in the city that we're doing an assessment project. They would have the ability to come in and object to the assessment or any of the other things. Just because nobody's contacting us or nobody's getting back to us or being silent as to what their intentions are doesn't necessarily mean we couldn't attempt to assess that location. The other thing is it would be whether or not you wanted to extend the boundaries of your assessment parameters. And I'm not saying to do this, but if you look at it, at some point in time, that road could truly benefit American Crystal Sugar a lot, and could potentially, as soon as you open it up, though they say they're not going to redirect the trucks or the beat trucks or going in and out of there, there's nothing to say that they won't. And that would tend to direct a benefit to that property as well. So I'm not saying we are going to do that. I'm just saying that there is the possibility that we could include that into an assessment and then have to deal with the discussions as we would any other assessment project.
And Ron, to that point, I fully agree. You'd assess it, but you'd be limited to the benefit that you actually brought to that property.
I have no disagreement. You still would be on the special benefits test.
Yep.
The other issue is just like any other special, I shouldn't say an issue, but the other thing, just like any other special assessment, if you don't contest it, then you are lumped in with the assessment just like anybody else for the amount that you've been assessed. So it is the same as any other project. I just hate to say that because we're not getting any feedback or response from anybody, that side can't be assessed. And that's more of the point that I'm addressing.
Mr. Stordahl, do you have something to add? Yeah, go ahead.
This is Jason. Just chiming in, I agree with what the mayor and Mr. Galstad are saying here. With both of them, American Crystal does actually use 10th. They don't have beat trucks driving in and around there, but that is where they access their ponds from the backside back there. And that's part of the problem on 10th, where the concrete ends and the gravel starts there as you go to the east, is that when contractors are coming in and out of the American Crystal site, sometimes there gets to be quite a bit of traffic, and the road just deteriorates big time as far as the gravel road. And the other point I just wanted to make too is, I have nothing against roundabouts. In fact, I like them in the right places. Biglin Road be a good place for them. But 10th, I guess the argument for 10th would be that, even the concrete part is deteriorating and falling apart. And this year is not a typical year as far as our winters go, but spring and fall, moisture-wise, and the moisture that's just under the roadbed from pond seepage and whatnot, that road is typically much, much worse spring and fall, sometimes to the point where it's almost unpassable. So if we weren't going to do this project, federal project on 10th, we're looking at probably having to remove the concrete that's there and put down gravel, hopefully some sort of decent base, and gravel it until we can at a future time, because it's getting to the point where storm sewers are falling in there, curb and gutters are eroded underneath. It's not in great condition. And the traffic there isn't as much as Biglin Road by any means, but the type of traffic is fairly heavy, and it doesn't do the road any good,
Thank you, Jason. Anybody
Thank you.
else? Mr. Helms?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think the other thing we need to bring up here too on this 10th Street is the fact that the reason it come into play is because of the water issue in the industrial park. When we get them heavy rains like we had last year, just about every one of those businesses out there are impassable. They can't get to them because there's so much water. And all this water in that industrial park, Jason, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm under the understanding that all that water in the industrial park all comes back to 10th Street and then goes east out by Highway 2 to a lift station out there. And then goes down to the Murray or the Cooley or whatever it is down there. So everything kind of hinges on this 10th Street out there in that industrial park. And that was my big thing about this 10th Street is because I know if I was out in an industrial park, which I had looked out there at one time, and I couldn't get there because of all the water, I wouldn't be a happy camper. And that's just all the more reason to run people out. So that's the only reason that I think it needs to be done. It's more critical because of that.
You have something?
Yeah, one thing?
Yeah.
Mr. Gordy, I hate to put you on the spot, and if you need to take some time to research, but if you have an off-the-cuff response, it's great. So we're thinking about our industrial park, and we've heard about, taking care of our current tenants or even property owners in the industrial park. How about future development of industrial park? How critical would this repaving and extension be to any future development as you see it unfolding in there?
Ultimately, 10th Street will be a major access point to any industrial park that's developed east of the current industrial park. And it will have to be able to handle traffic and heavy traffic at that point in time.
Any timeline for that?
No. The expansion of the industrial park is going to be a very expensive project. We're going to be looking for sources of funds, both on the state level. Because that parcel is not yet within the city, we'll also be looking for USDA rural development dollars, and we'll be looking for any other sources or partners that we can have to purchase the property and to build the improvements.
Mr. Larson?
Yeah. Mr. Emery, just a few questions on the Reinhardt-Biglin roundabout. I'll just ask two questions and then let you respond. Is there a cost difference between option 1 and option 2. Option 1 looks to be like there's some expanded scope with addition of the property acquisition. And then I'll just stop there because I forgot my second question.
Yeah, great question. I think construction-wise, I think option 1, option 2, construction-wise, they're probably about the same right now. You are correct. I think with option number 1, the city would be looking at the potential for some property acquisition there. So that would probably be the increased cost for option number 1. I think construction-wise, I think we can construct both of them for about the same dollar amount.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question, sorry about that, is what would be our plan with the driveways that would be impacted for the homeowners along Biglin Road? Well,
I think, looking at the two options there, they wouldn't, with either option, they wouldn't necessarily be, right within the roundabout. They're still going to be, backing out onto Biglin probably like they do right now. Probably the biggest concern I see right now, maybe with both options, is just Orton's there. And if you're going to leave Orton's onto Reinhardt and then out to Biglin is just, potentially, especially like a larger truck, bus, whatever, it might be a little more challenging to, to make that your way through there that way.
Mm-hmm. One more question. Sorry to keep piling on you here. In option 2, I don't see where there is a entrance from Reinhardt right into the Orton's property. I see what looks like a sidewalk or like a bike lane crossing. Can you confirm that there is no vehicular access from Reinhardt to Orton's in option 2?
Yeah, I see what you're looking at there, Brian. I think even with option 2, I think you would still, if nothing else, you'd have an entrance there from Reinhardt into Orton's there. Like I said, looking at that option right now, leaving Orton's and trying to make a left turn there, I don't know that you'd be able to accommodate that movement. But we could put an access, I think, into Orton's right there.
Okay, thank you.
Better. Thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Ellis, I'm going to put you on the spot, and maybe you don't have the information, but what I'm thinking about with our continued development on the south end, how important is a roundabout at Reinhardt and Biglin to continue the traffic flow and the safety in that corridor as we expand our city south farther?
Well, I think definitely dependent on a south end bridge. If we were to want a south end bridge, traffic flow through there is necessary. Right now, if anyone can recall, with MnDOT or any MnDOT road, the first thing we have to do when we're looking at an intersection in terms of control, we have to look at a roundabout first to see if that's the type of control that is qualified for that, and that is why we're at the roundabout situation that we are in now. Lights, while effective, for the amount of traffic at specific times of the day, I would think a roundabout would be the most efficient way of moving traffic on the south end.
Thank you. Mr. Emery, a question for you. I know that we've hired a consultant to study the Bigland corridor. Have we hired a consultant other than city staff to study our industrial park and make recommendations for traffic flow out there?
We have not.
Thank you. Anybody else have, Mr. Elms?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Emery, looking at this, going off of Mr. Larson's question there, it looks to me, looking at these maps here, that on this roundabout, pretty much every driveway in that area is affected, because when they come out of there, they only have one way they can go right now. If you do this roundabout, because you got them dividers in there. So you look at those driveways, they're only going to be able to go one direction when they come out of their driveway. So if they want to go south, they're going to have to go north and then get turned around and come back to go south on that. So, and the other thing about roundabouts, I think, is misleading to me anyway. Roundabouts are, and I have no argument with the fact of moving traffic. Traffic flows through them pretty good. But the issue we're talking about here with the traffic being backed up, I don't care how many roundabouts you put on Biglin Road, it's not going to stop the backed up traffic on Biglin Road. The issue is the stoplight at the bridge. That's where the issue comes in. It's not the traffic moving. It's that stoplight that's creating all the problem there. That's why they're getting backed up. It ain't because of Reinhardt Drive. So,
Yeah.
So
I will, just to remind the council too, this Alliant Engineering did complete intersection control evaluation study of this intersection. And, you know, the one thing they did kind of note in that ACE study is, I mean, as far as traffic flow on Biglin, you know, what you currently have is going to be the most efficient traffic flow, is going to allow for the best traffic flow that you have, because you don't have any stop condition. You know, putting in the roundabout, you know, during those peak periods, it is probably going to back up traffic some on Biglin Road. But, you know, kind of the recommendation was, you know, for the, you know, 22.5 to 23 hours a day, the roundabout was probably just the most efficient traffic control device that you could put out there. But you're right, Mr. Holmes, during that morning peak period, you're going to back up some traffic onto Biglin, onto Biglin, but it is going to make access from Reinhardt onto Biglin easier.
But I'm a little concerned about that, getting off of Reinhardt onto Biglin at that time in the morning, even on a roundabout, because if that traffic is on Biglin Road and it's flowing as hard and steady as everybody says that it is, you've got to have some pretty courteous people to let those people off of Reinhardt into that roundabout, because they just keep flowing. I've been in them before, and it's hard to get into them sometimes if the traffic's really thick.
Well, yeah.
So the other thing...
One advantage you're going to have there a little bit too is, you know, right now traffic is probably flowing 30, 35 miles an hour out there. So you're trying to get out into Biglin, you know, dodging traffic. Where here, as you come into that roundabout, you know, you're probably going 10 to 15 miles per hour.
Yeah, well, hopefully they are. But you touched on it earlier too, that roundabouts maybe flow traffic better, but roundabouts, their main design, I believe, is to slow traffic down. That's their main design for it. That's why they want them, slowing traffic down. I drove up the Thief River on Saturday just to drive through those roundabouts up there and see how they worked. And the ones on Highway 1 over there by the Ralph, you know, there's two of them within about a block or 2 blocks maybe. There's two of them right there, and one of them's right by the railroad tracks, which kind of surprised me that you come out right by the railroad track there. I talked to some people that's been through the trucks or whatever. The thing about roundabouts to me too is that they're built to fail right from day one, because they build them so that you can drive up on the curbs of them on the center. And the issue I have with that, I'll explain that. The issue I have with that, if you take a CDL test, and Mr. Demers, you probably have done this, you take a CDL test and you got that instructor in that truck with you and you run over a curb, you're done immediately. You're done. So now DOT is telling you it's okay to run over curbs, but yet the instructor is telling you can't. And I'll guarantee you, if they build a roundabout, I'll guarantee you that that instructor is going to take you through that roundabout, because it's going to be something new and he's going to do it. And if you run over that curb, you're going to be done. And that's the thing that bothers me about roundabouts. They're set up to fail immediately because of that reason. And now you want to, if you do this option 2 and move it into Reinhardt Drive more, now you're shrinking that roundabout down even more yet to get it to fit in there. And looking at this picture here right now, and trying to run a bus through there with this thing like this, because you get that, move that into Reinhardt Drive, now the people that's going south is going to make a pretty big loop there to get back onto Biglin, where the people heading north on Biglin is going to have just a little jog because of the way you're getting it set up here. So I'm not saying roundabout's not the correct thing. I'm just saying that we maybe should look at it a little bit further and make sure that we're doing the right thing.
And with both options, Mr. Helms, they are both 110-foot diameter roundabouts. So with option 2, the roundabout is still the same size. That inner circle, it does have a kind of a mountable curb there. So it is kind of designed for, if you get that larger truck semi, that, the trailer can kind of go up and over that if need be. So, I mean, that inner circle is designed with mountable curb to, to provide that. I don't know, like you said, Mr. Helms, I don't know in a driving test if the trailer jumped that, if you would fail your driving test. I don't know. I can't speak for that.
Well, I'm looking at the picture diagrams here, and then option 1, it says 120 foot, and option 2 says 110 foot on the inscribed diameter. So it is a little bit smaller, if that's correct.
Oh, 120. Okay, I stand corrected then.
But I'm just saying that.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Just to clarify too, the roundabouts are designed for a right turn with a bus in mind, correct?
For a right turn?
Yes.
Yeah, so right on the roundabout design there, it's saying it's designed for a right turn with a bus in mind, so it should be able to accommodate buses with no problems.
Yeah.
Mr. Johnson?
I can tell we're going to have some big discussions on this. I'm with the people in my ward. They would use the roundabout where they would not use the industrial park. So taxpayers want the roundabout. Thank you.
Mayor.
And Nancy and Steve can pipe in. I know a lot of the safety factor, Dale, to your point, that the purpose of a roundabout is to slow down the traffic, to kind of calm the traffic. One of the things it also accomplishes is it changes the nature of collisions if there would be a collision. Whereas at the regular intersection, you can get T-boned or head-on collision. And even if numbers of collisions were the same coming in and out of a roundabout, it'd be more at that soft angle with fewer injuries or less severe injuries. And so they'll say, indeed, there are fewer collisions, and when you have them, less deadly, less likely to injure people because not head-on, not T-bone, but that soft angle coming in and out. So I think there are some safety factors that can be built into roundabouts for the vehicular component. And I won't even go into it. I've always been concerned, and nobody's quite convinced me that we have increased pedestrian safety through roundabouts. That's for another day. And then if any of our staff want to weigh in back to that Alliant Engineering, I did not pull it up between meetings, but I'm going by memory. With the current flows that we have for traffic, I think Steve mentioned, in terms of not obstructing flow along Bigland, the best is what we have now. Any structure that would create access to the cross streets would slow the traffic on Bigland. That's understandable. But with the current flows of traffic that we have, on all of the ones that I saw, both for 13th and for Reinhardt, under the current scenario because of safety, looking at collisions that have happened, which there have been virtually none. I was told there was one of a gentleman who just got a little disoriented and hit a electrical component of some kind. But the do nothing option showed to be, for right now, for current flows of traffic, the most satisfactory option. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes. Level of service right now is for 23 and a half hours of the day, level of service is quite good. And based on the amount of traffic or predicted ADT, warranting where we would truly need some sort of intersection control was not needed at this point in time.
So we'd be building for the future. If we did this, yes, in anticipation of future development. I know it would be better now in some ways, and yet in terms of where it would really be warranted and needed, we're building for the future, and there's nothing wrong with that either.
Mr. Reeville.
I think what I'm hearing from Jason is that he would prefer that we do the project up north first because it's more of an immediate need, that the road is in such bad repair. These roads here are in excellent condition at this point. So our better option would be to do the one that is in bad repair right now and come back and do this one later. Just my thought.
Better.
Thank you, Mr. President. Traffic flow won't be enhanced or may be enhanced somewhat with the roundabout, but the other thing that it's really going to enhance is the access onto Bigland Road from Reinhardt and other intersections along the Bigland Road corridor. They are going to be able to get in, go on to they're going to be able to get onto Reinhardt and access Bigland better with a roundabout than the current configuration they have now. And that's needed also.
Totally agree. That would be improved. That left turn right there in the morning would be greatly improved, for sure.
The question I have for Mr. Emery and Jason, you brought it up, so I'm going to ask you, you said that if we did not do 10th and we returned it to gravel, I mean, has that been discussed with those landowners up there and business owners? I'm assuming that would not be their wishes, but do we know what the cost of that would be, just so we know?
We have not discussed it with the landowners, nor have we put any cost to it right now.
Would there be, other than the gravel work, would there be any other work that you would have to do, especially with the sanitary or whatever?
There wouldn't have to, right now there wouldn't have to be any work done with the sanitary. There would have to be a little bit of work done with storm, just as far as catch basins and stuff go, because if we were to remove the concrete, then we wouldn't want the catch basins to sit as they currently do, because they would just fill with gravel and they'd be an issue. We'd be better off possibly even putting it in drain tile on the subgrade, and draining it right into the storm sewer, or just, trying to direct that water into the ditch on the north side or the south side of the road, and trying to get that to flow into a different style of catch basin possibly. It's not anything that we've really looked into too deep, but we'd have to do something with the water, and the storm sewer, the sanitary sewer would probably be fine for right now. The storm sewer itself, the underground portion of the storm sewer, is actually in fairly good condition as we've cleaned along there. They're still not done cleaning from last year. They just ran into a few snags, but there was a lot of gravel removed from those sections all along there on the south side of 10th. And there was some area, the catch basin or manhole coming up where it wasn't filled when it was put in. There was areas where there was holes in there it was almost like a temporary patch or whatever you want to call it. And that's where we're getting a lot of the issues, and that's what we've been fixing as we go along there. So there wouldn't be a whole lot of storm sewer stuff, and there would be probably no sanitary right now.
I think, having the unknown of what it would cost us, I guess, is my mind too on that. It'd be nice to know that. Let's say that stars aligned and we did the roundabout and we gravelled that. What would the cost of the city be then? I guess that's what I would want to know. If that's the route we went. Not trying to add work to your, Mr. Emery, but I'm just saying, since Jason brought it up, if we didn't do 10th, this is what we probably would have to do.
Yep. We could easily figure what it would cost to remove kind of the existing pavement section, curb and gutter, and just, core it out and put in gravel. And we could easily figure that out too.
Sure. The other question I do have, looking at the option 1 and 2, I guess, has nothing to do with the roundabout, but it has everything to do with the gas station there. Accessibility, I know that there are certain vehicles that go in there that fill up for the diesel, and I'm thinking if they can't go back, turn left off the south driveway there to go back onto Bigland, we're diverting that traffic down to Reinhardt and into those off streets or residential streets. Is that wise? Because would they be able to even turn around in the ordinance and go back to 5th, and then they'd have to turn right in and go through the roundabout and go back north there? So I guess I'm not sure if Emery has ever brought that up. It's just a thought process where you do see some larger vehicles that are getting diesel in there. How would they get back onto Biglin from that? Knowing that you'd have to change the driveways, and you would not, on the south side of the driveway, you would not be able to turn left to go back to Bigland.
Yeah, I mean, looking at option 2, you're right, Mr. Olstad. Just looking at it right now, you'd probably have to take a right onto Reinhardt, go down to 6th to get back on.
Then go to left, go to Biglin, and try to get on the Biglin Road.
Right.
So you run into the traffic issue there. Trying to get a bigger vehicle on it. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not needing to pick on it. I just entered my mind looking at the diagram, thinking how would they get back on, you know.
And there's a lot of design features, that, it's got to be worked through on this thing. And again, just, there has not been that, let's say, that effort, I guess, put in to probably answer all of these specific questions at this point.
Well, I'm sure not. I'm not didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just was looking at it and I thought about it because I drive every day and I do see them sitting there, and I'm like just looking at it, going, how do they get back on here then?
Right.
Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Emery? Mr. Larson?
Mr. President, I could just kind of add some of my final comments. I'm in favor of the traffic circle at Reinhardt and Bigland. I think that would be my preferred option. These are all really good, high value projects for the city. And the reason that I think that the traffic circle here should be our highest priority is that it improves overall safety up and down this corridor. And I see the south end here is our area for the largest chance of an increase in residential growth. I firmly believe we're going to have 1 or hopefully 2 new bridges on the south end of East Grand Forks within the next 5 to 10 years. And improving the safety of these intersections improves that corridor, and that's what connects our families to our public schools. So I really think that this is a project that really shows our values here in East Grand Forks: public safety, access to our schools, and setting ourselves up for the future. That being said, I am pretty concerned here, option 1 in particular, that we're not understanding the full cost of this. We look at this $1.6 million project, but we don't know the property acquisition. We don't know the driveways. There's a lot of unknowns here, and it would be irresponsible to support a project that we can't afford. So that's where I am conflicted internally. This is a project that I like, but if I don't know if we can afford it, I don't know how we could put an official stamp on it. That's it for me.
I can tell you, Mr. Larson, that was one of the main issues that I had back when we started talking about this, was the acquisition if we had to. I know that we hated to throw numbers out, what it would cost, and I know that Mr. Vetter doesn't like it when someone says it's going to cost another $1 million to buy properties, because that's what was floated back at the end of the day, so that's why I throw it out. But, we don't know, and I guess that is tough question to ask unless we're saying we're moving forward, then we get into that phase. And I guess it's going to be up to us if we want to move forward and say, well, we don't want to acquire any property. We want to do the other option and make it smaller, and then down the road saying we probably should have made it bigger. So, Mayor.
And I think Mr. Galstad would tell us, and I know we're not doing that, but if we start to banter about property acquisition costs, we probably compromise our position, so we're not going to go there. But I would like, if there would be a way, through our legal department, if there would be a way to begin to approximate some of those things. We want to do the right thing to those adjacent properties. We want to do the right thing. You know, if this is something, just like we're saying to the South End Bridge, if it's for the greater good to put in a South End neighborhood bridge, well, let's pay attention to those adjacent properties on both sides of the river and do the right thing by them as we put that in. The same thing would be true on this roundabout. Let's do the right thing to those adjacent properties. If they have to make some small sacrifice for the greater good, let's be mindful of that and let's take care of those folks as well. But it would be helpful to have some handle, some sense of what that looks like, if it could be done. That would be important, I think, as we weigh the various projects.
Mr. Mayor, Council President, if I may, I can jump into that for just a moment. I do have a fair amount of experience in property acquisition through eminent domain, in my previous jobs, and what tends to drive it is, it's not so much of an issue of tipping our hand as far as what the cost would be, because what ends up happening is the city gets an appraiser, appraises the property, the potential property owner, the property owner that we're taking the property from gets an appraiser. We do have to pay a certain amount for that, for them to get an appraiser. They get to hire their own, but we have to pay a portion of that, not to exceed amount. And then what ends up happening then is you try to negotiate the number between the two appraisers, because typically the city's is lower, theirs is higher, and hopefully you can come to an agreement. If not, then you have to go to court and have that number assigned by a judge. And so with that, so I think if we were willing to fund the cost of getting an appraisal of what that would be, potentially for taking that property, there would be an upfront investment, but I think it would give us a somewhat rough idea of what property acquisition might cost, not counting any soft costs, meaning legal, mediation fees, those types of things, court costs.
I guess it gets down to, I think we have a lot more discussions to be had. I don't think, I know we have, if let's say we move back and go to the 10th Street, we have 4 to 5 months we have to work through, but still we need to keep moving forward, but we don't want to get too far down the road. I don't think anybody here today has all the answers to which way to, even though I don't have all the answers, I like to see estimations of what it's going to cost us on top of the building construction. Yes, I think 10th Street needs to be done, but also I think the growth and the futuristic looking at what we need to do for the south end needs to be done also. And if we have to space these apart, do we space apart, 10th Street now and do the roundabout later, or do the roundabout now and 10th Street down the road? And then look at what it costs us to do the gravel now just to make it usable instead of having people drive on private property. So, Mr. Helms?
Just so the council's aware too, what I did find out through Earl is it sounds like there's been discussions already that the federal funds in 2026 are going to be used for improvements on the Minnesota Bridge. There's already kind of an agreement in place between, Grand Forks, let's say East Grand Forks, that's the project that, we'll be looking at doing in 2026. So just kind of want to make you aware of that if those dollars are already spoken for, we won't, let's say, receive these federal sub-target dollars for street-related projects and for until 2030.
Who agreed to that?
Do you know, Nancy?
The only thing I can think of is because if it's sub-target dollars, then the state might have entered into some sort of an agreement with Grand Forks because it needs to be done, but that's a guess. I'm just not sure.
Yeah.
Kind of throws a wrench into planning, doesn't it? Anybody else have anything? Mr. Helms?
I just had one quick question, and I don't know who can answer it, but is there a time frame on this these dollars to get for these, either one of these projects we're talking about? I mean, how much time do we have before, before we have to, or do we have to have something into the state saying this is where it's going, or has that already been done, or is that?
What's the drop dead date, Steve Emery, to amend the plan that would move the sub-target dollars? What's the drop dead date where we have to start that process?
I don't know if there's a drop dead date. We are going to have to do kind of a project memorandum and everything, so I think we have to have everything in place, and we have to have plans and specs into probably the state by probably next January, February, I think. So, we're probably 10 months away from, when we'd have to have plans and specs developed and that type of stuff.
I guess my request for staff would be, please do what you can to keep these two projects moving ahead in parallel with gathering new information to give us the ability to make an informed choice at some time in the future before the drop dead date. Keep them moving ahead in parallel. We do not have a consensus around here, and certainly some new information could come to light that would make it pretty obvious we want to go one way or the other. So do your best to keep them moving ahead in parallel, even if it costs some money. Because let's say you do look at appraisals for the roundabout. They'll have to be freshened up if we do it at some point in the future, but at least you'd have an idea, in the ballpark of what the costs would be. So those wouldn't ever be worthless. Even in the future, it would be helpful to know for planning what that looks like. So I guess that's my challenge, is just keep them both moving ahead in parallel, and then let us make an informed choice somewhere in the future.
And I would like to add that we're probably at an earlier date than December, January of next year. Just based on the fact that MnDOT dollars start July 1, so that would be your 2022 dollars, starting July 1 of this year, and then amending the TIP and the long-range transportation plan. I would think that 6 months would maybe be a more accurate time frame. Not saying that there's any drop dead date, but I think at some point you kind of have to be pretty firm. Or because these are sub-target dollars, there's an opportunity, since we rotate them with other communities, that they would rotate the funds to a different community or ask us to switch years. So I would think that Steve and I would probably, if Steve needs any help, but we're probably looking at a little tighter timeline. So.
Mr. Demers.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess one thing I'd look for from staff is obviously it can be estimated, but a timeline starting at today as zero, time zero, going out to, when the project would be let, of what that looks like. I think I'm leaning towards the roundabout project, but I'm very concerned about the timeline on it. I mean, if you're talking about doing land acquisition or eminent domains are probably a 2-year process in and of itself.
But that takes a while too.
I mean, I would like to see staff draft up, 2 timelines, one for each project starting right now that gets you to the end point with, obviously, we're not going to hold you to whatever, but you should be able to estimate all the different steps that need to go into it. Just because I think if we aren't able to do fit it into that timeline. I just think it would be terrible, I think, if all of a sudden we decide to go down the Roundabout road and we can't acquire property, therefore we can't expend, and therefore we can't use this subtarget dollars for really, you're talking 12 years, before you're eligible again, if we're talking about bridge and all that kind of stuff. So that's my biggest concern. I think both projects have, I think, about equal merit. I think it affects, there's two different functions. I think Brian laid it out pretty nicely about the importance of the roundabout, and it's a compelling argument. I do think that there is an argument to be made for our industrial park and our industrial park growth, and while it isn't residential taxpayers, there's a lot of tax dollars that get, I think there's probably a couple $100,000 worth of property tax collected along that corridor, between the north side and the south side.
And jobs.
And jobs. And like I said, and I think I talked to a couple council members after the last meeting, and it really is, it's just where we want to prioritize. And I think they have equal merit and equal functionality. It's really going to come down to me about if we can fit both, or fit them in. I think, looking at it, I think the 10th is just more shovel ready. Or it's not shovel ready. It's just an easier project to get done. This roundabout has some complexity to it that I fear could push us out past that target date. So that's my only thoughts. Thank you.
Council President Olsted, Councilmember Demers, if I may, I can address that just very quickly. As far as the acquisition timeline for property for a potential roundabout, there's two options that you can go. There's the quick take option, which you can have the property available within a few months to utilize. The drawback on that particular one is that you get the property earlier, but the process for determining what you pay for it is out in the future. So you get the property, but there's an uncertain level of what you're going to pay for it. You kind of get an estimate on what from your appraisal, but it's still to be negotiated after that. And I'll put this together in a report. Your point is well taken. Whereas the regular process for property acquisition for eminent domain, 18 months is fairly common, but can be shorter, can be longer. But I'll put that together in a report. Certainly, I'll take that. Just give you an update.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, I think we'll have some work to do on this, and I guess more discussion we can happening down the road. So, Mr. Emery, do you have everything you need? Mr. Murphy?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, move on to number 3, discussion about library services. Charlotte.
Good evening. The mayor invited the library board to share its discussion on library services looking forward because of what we've been doing, creating new services and looking to our future. We have to decide what we can actually do with our staffing and what we cannot do. So what you have in your packet are the 5 things that the library board prioritized as services that we won't be able to provide. They are things that we did pre-pandemic, but we cannot do it with the staffing that we have. And the reason is with the tutoring, it takes a lot more expertise and experience in education, in recruiting of the volunteers, of getting the background check, making sure that they know how to work with children and adults, because anyone who's a student can take part in our tutoring. And then training, taking care of the supplies, and working with the parents of the younger people who are being tutored. What I've included in the report that I sent in to you is the 2019 stats, simply because we didn't have a regular year in 2020, but to look at the fact that we had served 368 students between kindergarten and college level. Proctoring is another education concern for the community. We've done a lot of online education in the last year plus, And what happened pre-pandemic is the library is one of the few places that will proctor students from anywhere. They don't do it across the river anymore. They will do it at each college individually, but we have a lot of students in the East Grand Forks area that are attending schools that are further away. And you have to have a degree to proctor, otherwise the schools won't accept you. And so we cannot use our part-time staff who, for the most part, are students themselves. And the proctoring that we do, each one of those students have to have a library card, and they also pay for each test that they take. And that is included in their education expenses for most of these educational institutions. Also, the volunteers, as you can see, we had the equivalent of nearly $27,000 in in-house work with volunteers. Anything from working in the friend store, working at the front desk, helping us with programming, to do our summer reading program. We can easily have 10 to 20 volunteers for a program, which takes a lot of coordination and recruitment. And again, here we have to do background checks on these people that are working with children. So in 2019, we had over 471 different volunteers. And that's a lot of people to keep in contact with and to help with the schedule. The outreach is something that we worked very hard to develop at the library, and I would really hate to see it diminished, but if we don't have enough people in-house to do the very basic library services, we cannot send people out beyond the building. We were reading at Edgewood Vista. We had a pop-up library that went over to Good Sam's. We go into the schools and we bring authors when we have grants or different workshops. And so there are a number of things that we've tried to do to be part of the library, not just a storage facility where people come into to get their materials. And then with the fifth one on the list, the monthly newsletter and Facebook, we've been maintaining right now, but our program coordinator has been doing it. And if that position is going to try and do programs in-house and only in-house, if we terminate these other things, she will not have the time to do this. It takes a lot of prep. I hope some of you have taken some advantage and gotten to see one of her story times or Campbell Creates. We've had people from all over, including Canada, enjoy some of our online programs, which is fantastic. We have a perception survey out right now to help determine what the community is satisfied with what we're doing right now, what they enjoy, what's important to them, and going out into the future. When we open up, what is it you want to see done? Do you want us to continue what we're doing? Do you want us to do more? So we will have some actual information from the patrons, not just their constant thank you, we're so glad you're open, we're so glad that you're here. But with restrictions lifting and our students back in school, we've had the schools call us about tutoring and about proctoring. The seniors are getting their shots. They want to volunteer. Young families are now going out because it's absolutely gorgeous outside. They're over at Sherlock Park and they're coming into the library and they want to volunteer to feed the guinea pigs or to clean the cages. They want to volunteer and make sure that we have our summer reading program. But what the library board decided was these 5 things, when we prioritized all the different services that we do, these are the ones that are going to have to be held and cannot be done until we're fully staffed with a professional staff. Are there any questions?
Charlotte, thank you so much for agreeing to come before us and share this. Charlotte just sent out an update in an email, which I read, and I asked if she would be willing to come before us. you know, sometimes we make decisions on staffing levels and budgetary considerations, and it would be helpful to have this little extra depth of knowledge that the decisions we're making from a staffing standpoint, that's really what's in play. And again, thank you for trusting that this was not my effort to say, oh, and by the way, I want to micromanage your library. I want to tell you how to do it because I'm so smart in how to run a library, which I'm not. So thanks for trusting us to bring it, really to share for us to make the most informed decision that we can make once again on staffing levels inside that library, and knowing that by our decision not to bring that position in, that this is the tough decisions that you and your board are having to make, and maybe this is how it has to ride for a while. But I did want folks to know, you know, what's in play. And now we can talk about if these are priorities for us or not, and if they are, we'll talk about how that happens. And again, either way, now at least we know what are the consequences of decisions that we make. So thanks, Charlotte.
You're welcome. We've had 9 months without this position, and the library board discusses regularly what we're able to do and what we've been able, or what we've had to put on hold. So the board is still very much in support of returning that position to being filled. So we will be back and ask for that, and we're hoping that the council will come in and take advantage of the services and find out what we're doing over here. So thank you.
Thank you. I know, I don't know how many council members been to the library before, but I know that I never did go there until I got on the board. And it's amazing the people they have come and go out of that place, and the service they provide. I had no idea. This position, I believe, if I'm correct, Charlotte, this position is in the budget already for this position, correct? And the library is one of the few departments that's stayed within their budget for years and years and years. They've done a good job of doing that. And it's sad to see, because with this pandemic going on and everything still, how much that library has been important to people. Again, I didn't realize it until I got up there, but it's something that's needed, and I think that I would hope the council would support it and keep this stuff going. And I know Charlotte puts in lots of extra hours of her own time over and above the call of duty, but she does it to make it work and so they're there with people, so people can use the library. So I'd like to see this position get filled to hopefully take care of some of that help there. So thanks.
So thank you for letting me share what we do over there. There's also good stories, but we are working to provide a place for the community.
Thank you, ma'am. Move on to 4, request to hire fundraising consultant. Reid, are you there, sir?
Thank you, Mr. President. Council, good evening. So we have, updating from a previous work session conversation, we sent out a request for qualifications for firms that would be able to conduct a study of the fundraising capacity in our community, and the interest in the projects, the recreation projects that we've discussed. We sent out an RFQ and received a total of 5 candidates that submitted a proposal for us. Of the 5 that we received, we reviewed them, and Mr. Murphy sat in on interviews with myself, with 3 that we labeled as finalists. The 3 that we chose as finalists to interview are all national fundraising consulting firms for nonprofit organizations, but each had some experience working within the region. And when I say the region, kind of up and down the Red River Valley or the Midwest, the North Dakota, Minnesota, South Dakota areas. All three, I think, would do a very good job with the study. Did a great job, I think, in explaining how they would proceed with the study and how they'd help lay out things for us. But ultimately, upon review of the three of them and the scope of work that we requested and the proposal, including the price fee that they provided, I would like to recommend that we would have Convergent Nonprofit Solutions be contracted to do the work. A little background about them: they are corporate based in Atlanta, Georgia, but have consultants that work all over the country and are stationed or located all over the country. The project manager that we would get assigned to us, should we select or choose to move forward with them to do the work, has significant experience in working in fundraising campaigns for athletic type facilities or fitness centers. He has a long history of working, both professionally working in management at YMCAs as well as in his later career fundraising to build YMCAs or fitness centers of that likeliness. So we felt like it was a good match with the projects that we're looking at to ask them to do the work. Kind of the scope of the work and the study that we'd look to have them do is really to target a potential list of stakeholders within our community, both business leaders, residents, people that are in use of the facilities, both whether they're alumni of any of our programs or current members. We'd ultimately start with a list of probably 80 to 100 people, and then through some meetings and conversations, try to narrow that down to a group of 40 to 60 that would be interested in sitting down for an interview with this consulting firm. It would give them an opportunity to, the stakeholder that they would interview, be able to give them an opportunity to sit down with the consultant directly without any city council members or parks and recreation staff or building committee volunteers in the meeting, and really be able to create an open dialogue where they could really truly tell us what they think about the projects we've discussed, their likeness for, are we headed the right direction, and what they think the community needs to see in improvements in these rec facilities, and ultimately be able to start getting into some of the questions of, if a project like this was to move forward, would you be interested in funding or helping donate towards the project? And then even all the way up to the level of being able to try to identify through their experience to what degree people would be interested in donating, and ultimately be able to come back to us with what they see as a potential goal for us to move forward with, whether that be to throw numbers out, whether that be $1 million or $5 million or anything in between or above. To really help to set that next piece of it out. So I think that this group will do a really good job with that. Once we get them on board, the timeline to be able to do the work is laid out at about 12 weeks. And that's going to be largely dependent. I think we have a lot of work in the forefront to make sure that that can stay on the timeline it needs, because we are not a traditional nonprofit in that we don't have a donor list to give them to start with. We certainly have stakeholders and people we think that have a strong interest within our programs and in our community, but in the traditional sense of fundraising, we don't have any history of that. So it'll take us a little bit more time in the front end to get prepared to give them a list of who to contact. But once we do so, we think it'll be about 10 to 12 weeks to get the report returned in final back to us.
Do you have any questions for Mr. Huttunen? Mr. Demers.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate you bringing this proposal forward. While in the past, I think we have a kind of that by our bootstraps can-do attitude about fundraising, and if you listen to people that have done it before, we've always said, well, we just do it. And but I think for something that is potentially a project that has a pretty large magnitude, this is a way that we should go. I've been involved in some of this stuff before, where for another organization, and we try to do the fundraising ourselves by word of mouth and all that kind of stuff, and it really fell apart. We ended up hiring a company to come in and do the extensive research and the feasibility, and it really paid off. It was amazing that they were able to do that, which leads me kind of to my question. This just, the deliverable is just basically the findings, the feasibility of what's available. Is this group also available to facilitate, manage the actual campaign, or are they just the feasibility? The one fear I have, and when we were going through it with another group, is there's a lot of these companies that just come in and tell you what it is, give you the list of donors, and there's really nothing holding them to that. You guys could raise $30 million. We asked, 50 people, and that's what they say. And then there's no follow-up to it. There's nothing that they have to go out and prove. I'm just wondering, is the plan then to hire a different group to follow up? Is the plan for us to follow up and do the campaign ourselves? Or is it to potentially hire this group to go forward? Thank you.
Anybody else have anything?
Thank you, Councilmember Demers, Mr. President. So, great question. I think it's kind of a multifaceted answer. And to start, and most simply, yes, this firm that I've recommended, and for that matter, all of the firms that we interviewed, they would all be set up and probably even want to help us with the actual fundraising campaign. The scope of work that we asked for and the qualifications and the fee that you see submitted is solely for the fundraising, for the feasibility study portion. Once that comes back and that gets presented to the City Council, I would expect and want there to be a follow-up conversation and planning of, do we as a community feel like the goal that they gave us is attainable, and then how do we attain it? And do we attain it by, say, contracting for this company to give us just prep work and background, setting up meetings, doing the prep work so that we're prepared to go in ourselves and make an ask, or use a volunteer task force to make an ask? From that standpoint, all the way up through, we could retain their work to be involved in every single factor of the day-to-day of fundraising, to make all the way through till our goal is attained. Convergent, when we ask them that question, they say quite strongly that they feel like they're most valuable to us if we retain them all the way through the fundraising campaign. They tout a lot of their work, and in the packet that's provided, they talk a lot about they have a return on investment outcome, and they look very closely once the fundraising study is complete. And if we would retain them for further work, they have a lot of great work and resources and tables that they can provide that can start to tell a donor or a business owner, what is the return on investment to you as a resident, as a business owner in this community by helping support this project get done. They look a lot at economic impact and talked at length about how that was really one of their strongest points. So in long answer, yes, I think we'd be set up if we chose to locally to work with them through a campaign.
Yeah, and if I may just jump onto that, one thing I will say is going through this process, I am very appreciative that Reid was involved in this. His experience in his former position with the nonprofit like he was, he brought a lot of very good insight into the idea of fundraising that I just don't have the experience with. So Reid did a very good job on that, and I was very appreciative that he was a part of that. And the answer to the question is, yeah, I think we will retain them, but it's exactly what it will look like, we're not really sure yet. It really depends what the report comes back, who the donors might be, and what level of familiarity we have with those donors, meaning from our fundraising committee, how much need there might be. So it might be more, it could be something where it could be more assistance with certain potential donors and less with others, depending what our familiarity is with them. But I definitely think we are not experienced enough in this that we would need guidance on the fundraising part. So hopefully that answers your question.
Anybody else have anything at this time? See none, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Number 5, request regarding dance licenses. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Council President. This one, it's not a real big agenda item, but what it, with the closures due to COVID, and the dance licensing, particularly since they're not very many are happening at all due to the restrictions and the maximum capacities and that. So for 2020, the council did a 25% reduction in the dance licenses. So what we're looking at is we really have two potential ways to deal with this. One, we could just do like we did last year, which was just a 25% reduction, or we could look at prorating the amount per month based on when the restrictions might be lifted, when the potential businesses might be able to have dances again. My recommendation for ease of this is since the majority of last year was restricted due to that because it came in March, I know we did 25%. I just think for ease of it, I would recommend that we do 25% reduction on it again. The dance licenses are not that expensive. It's a $30 per dance or $175 per year. So I would recommend that we do a 25% reduction on the per year portion of it. And if they want to do per dance, leave that alone because that's not prorated. Whenever the restrictions be lifted, they could do that. So that is my recommendation. So looking for feedback.
Mr. Murphy, what is our normal income? What do we normally take in per year on a normal year for these?
Under $1,000.
So my thought process is that we don't charge anything the rest of the year anyway. I think we just waive them. That's my personal belief. I think that time they get to have them, it's something we can help them out with, not having to charge a fee for it. They can just get let us know when they're going to have one and don't charge a fee. That's my personal belief. Mr. Demers?
Thank you, Mr. President. What are the people that pay this fee paying for with this? Are we posting a police officer at the site, or is it just to identify that there's a dance going into?
It's part of our ordinances for the ordinances you have for events that potentially have that have the potential for trouble. It's along the lines of liquor licensing, street dances, public gatherings, and that where the idea is to license them so that you have some regulation over them, that type of thing. No, we don't require, we don't post police officers for this. So it's along those veins. So we know what's happening when, and there is a certain degree of accountability. They have to show that they have their insurance, those kinds of things.
I guess
that is like a processing fee.
Thank you. I guess my take might be a little bit more extreme than Mark's, or Mr. Olson's. I guess we already have a special use permit, and if there is a big event going on, we have a whole process to go through this. I don't know if Ren McCormick's going to show up in his VW bug and ruin the town, in Footloose by having dances. I think the rational way to proceed with this is to eliminate the ordinance and the need for any fee for a dance in East Grand Forks. I don't know. It's 2021. I think it's ridiculous that we have a dance fee. Thank you.
Anybody else have anything? I think you got 2 no fees at all. I think that's, I don't know if anybody else has a comment.
I would say, unless I hear any other objections to that, I will bring that. I'll bring that forward for at least at this point to waive the fees. We can look at whether we're going to do away with the ordinance or not here at a future date.
Thank you, sir. Number 6, consider railroad crossing agreement. Mr. Murphy.
Okay, on this particular item, I really don't need any action from the council. This is more to make you aware of it, bring you up to speed with what's happening with that. So right now, we did receive a railroad highway rail grade crossing closure agreement and a draft street closure ordinance from the railroad that that they submit for utilization in cities where this comes across. So, so with that, this was brought forward. We talked about it at a department head meeting, and as far as staff, and one of the things we found, actually, I believe Mr. Galstad brought this up, is to make sure that if there are any utilities through that right of way, that we maintain an easement over it. At this point, we're not aware of any that go through there. There's potential private utilities, but it really depends on how far we in essence vacate that street. So this is just to get you, to bring you up to speed. So we are looking at that. We will determine how far that road closure and vacation needs to go. And based on that, if there are any easements or any utilities in there, we will have to have staff, meaning probably WSN, prepare the legal description for that so that that can be recorded. So unless you have any questions, we'll just move forward as we are proceeding.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Murphy? See none, sir. Request to purchase 1914 Tony Street Northwest. Mr. Murphy.
Yes, we received a request from a adjoining property owner. Hopefully you were able to make some sense out of the map up there. And we received it from a Keith Johnson. It's a property that's kind of roughly located between his property and Jeff Olson's property at the bottom of that cul-de-sac, the extension of 20th Street up there on the north end. He's brought this back before, but when we did some of the title search on that, there is a restriction on lot 12, which is directly below the lot, to the south of the lot that he's looking at, that states that was for ingress and egress to the golf course, and that was to run with that property in perpetuity, and if it was going to be used for anything else or any type of structure to put on it, that would revert back to the property owners that conveyed it or their heirs. It does not appear that lot 11 has that same restriction. We've not been able to find any restrictions on that, so that would be available for sale. The reason we're bringing this up, it is due to the fact that since this is a lot that that is a city-owned lot that would be available for sale, do we want to offer it for sale to the adjoining property owner, or would we want to advertise it with the other city lots that we have for sale for the potential of somebody buying it and putting a house up on there? I believe what the adjoining property owner states he intends on doing is putting up a shed or a garage type structure on it and utilizing it that way. They've apparently been mowing that vacant lot for a long time and kind of treating it as kind of an extension of their yard. So that's really what I'm looking for, is some direction. Do we want to just look at getting the appraisal for getting the fair market value and offering it to the neighbor, or do we want to see if there's an interest for potentially putting a house out there?
My personal thought is if someone is interested in buying it, I think move forward with Mr. Johnson's request. I think it's been sitting there for many years, although be it that we thought maybe there was restrictions on it and it wasn't advertised for sale. But I think if he's going to utilize it, as long as Nancy's okay with what he's going to be doing there and it passes the smell test with that, I don't have an issue with it. So, Mayor?
Thanks for bringing this forward, David. do we believe with all the setbacks, if you looked at the layout of that land, there is a buildable envelope, so someone could put a house on that lot? Is that true?
That is true. It would be small. It wouldn't be, how do I describe it? It wouldn't look like the other houses in the neighborhood, but it is a buildable lot.
Okay. So the next question that this adjacent property owner is going to have, and maybe we can just have a friendly little chat about it, whether we would have to go with an appraisal for that lot, or if we could take a look at a square foot price, which we have done on some parcels. And so where is the line between, yep, we should have an appraisal done, and where have we sold comparable properties, and we could look at the square foot price of recent sales and just apply it to the square footage of this lot and agree upon a price. The minute you bring in an appraisal, of course, the costs go up and whatnot. So if there would be a way to establish a fair price that's agreeable to this adjacent property owner, he'd prefer it. But if you all feel that it should be appraised, he would sure understand that as well.
Yeah. And I guess I'll just bring the appraisal portion is what our past practice has been, but it's Paul might be able to correct me if I'm misspeaking here, or maybe Nancy as well. I don't believe it is written in stone, but it's been our past practice.
The appraisal is the preferred option. David, we have looked, we've had some smaller parcels at what comparable parcels are. The difference here is that we're dealing with a residential price as opposed to the commercial prices and industrial prices that we've looked at in the past. And our pricing for the lots at Water's Edge, for example, are not based on a per square foot basis. They were set many years ago. So we would have to look at sales of other lots in the community to determine what the selling price is for an improved lot right now.
Thank you.
Nancy? Did we ever figure out if there was or if there's a levee easement back there, and how much of an encroachment that had?
Well, there's a levee easement on it. That would require pulling some core paperwork. And again, like I said, is it a buildable lot? Yes, it is. But it's a very small buildable lot. It would meet our minimum requirements for home size and setbacks. So there wouldn't be much to put on it. So to say that it's a buildable lot, it is. To say that it's a buildable lot meeting the neighborhood, I would say no. So
yeah, it's going to be a smaller house than what's out there.
Mr. Demers.
Thank you, Mr. President. This property has been available for 20 years. If we have someone that wants to purchase it, I think we should do anything and everything we can to get it sold.
I would say not. I would say we don't need an appraisal, and I think we need to look at what's sold in the city here and take it from there. So I think let's not waste the time. Let's move forward. If he wants to do it, let's expedite it rather than prolong it and move on.
Am I kind of gathering that's the consensus of the council?
I think so.
Okay, I will move on with that. Thank you.
Number 8, discussion on encroachment agreement. Mr. Galstad.
I was approached by everybody in the process, basically the closer, the buyer, and the seller's agent regarding this property. It came up in the title search that there was a resolution that allowed a temporary encroachment into the right-of-way. The issue that's going forward is it's kind of putting a damper on the sale, because there's some language in there regarding the value of a remodel to this property, and the buyer is concerned that the city potentially could say, no, you got to knock the property down and start over. They wouldn't want to buy it at that point. It would make no sense for them. In talking to Nancy, as well as looking at it myself, this encroachment's been there for years and years and years. It wouldn't do anything additional. It would be a benefit, a win-win to the city to have that property remodeled and upgraded. And if for some reason that property would be destroyed by fire or some other reason that it needed to be abandoned or knocked down, at that point, if it was going to be rebuilt, then it would be rebuilt within the property boundaries. So Mr. Demers pointed it out to me, and I didn't look at the new address. I think the address in that document may be wrong, which I could revise, but if the council would go forward with it, I would have it revised and put on the agenda for next Tuesday. And the property purchaser is just kind of interested in where it's going because he would like to close on that sale and upgrade the home there. So if I call him up, is there any real objections to this? It would still be an encroachment. It would still have restrictions, so.
Good.
Thank you.
Entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Helms.
Second.
Second by Johnson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion is carried. Meeting is adjourned.